I'm not going to speak about, because the panelists ahead of me have already covered a lot of the issues the important issues concerning institutions, governance, and policy. I'm going to restrict myself in the 5 minutes I've got to 3 issues. Synoptic information, hard evidence, and good practice. Because I think these are key steps towards transforming the way we manage our transboundary watersheds and resources. Let me justify the 3 choices I've made to talk to you today. First, on synoptic information. Synoptic information is about pulling all the information together in one picture or a few pictures that allow you to make decisions. We're dealing with very complex systems, and we need to integrate that information in some ways that decision makers can find useful. And finally, as we look at that information, seeing is often believing. We need hard evidence on which to base our decisions. We need rigorous science to reduce the ambiguity and controversy, and I will illustrate what I'm talking about shortly. And we need this to be timely so that decisions can be made in appropriate time frames. And finally, we need good practice, because without good practice, we're not getting anywhere. In any transboundary water basin, what happens in the rivers, what happens up and downstream, is the result of interactions of farmers on their farms, of forest users in their forests, of fishermen in their lakes. So it's the interaction of these processes that gives you the resource that you can then decide to share or not to share. The resource that gets polluted or silted, and I think we lose sight of this at our own peril. And I think there's some good news from the World Agroforestry Center on this front. So let me come to synoptic information first. We were talking about the Nile Basin. Here is the upstream part of the Nile Basin and the watersheds of that. This is the Great Lakes region of East Africa, and I'm using this just as an illustration. Now, the point I want to make here is this picture. When I heard that I was invited for this conference, I walked across to our geosciences lab and I said, I'm going to talk to these people who know a lot more about this issue than I do. Can I show them a picture about this region and start talking there? Within 10 minutes, I had this. That is the capacity you need as a decision maker to pull information together on areas so that you can actually make these decisions. Not a 1-month consultancy, not a 3-month research, to have information at the fingertips. Now, we're lucky at ICRAF because of the kind of information we have and the capacities here, we can do this. The important thing about this is based on ground truth data. Yeah. Hundreds of thousands of soil samples across Africa, really advanced science, building the models that are required to get this. So putting information together in packages that makes decision making easy. So let me then take the next step in the same region, and let's look at the soil carbon to 30 centimeters depth. ICRAF has one of the most advanced soil labs in the world, so this information is available to us. So why am I talking about soil carbon? Well, we're talking about adaptive capacity. Without soil carbon, the soils are unable to retain water or nutrients. So farmers in these regions without the soils, and you can see the dark areas in this picture, correspond to the areas with high vegetation. The green is our forests, and as you get browner, it gets drier and there's less vegetation. So you can see the soil carbon maps quite well to the vegetation, but it also maps to areas where better farming practices take place. Retaining soil carbon is essential because if the carbon gets washed away, it can take 100 or 200 years to rebuild the first layer, first centimeters of soil in normal processes. So adaptive capacity of the systems really depends on the amount of soil carbon there is in the system. Let me show you why. This is erosion in the same area, and I'll go back and forth. The redder the area, the higher the erosivity. The higher the erosion, the more silt that's being poured into the rivers and into the basins. And I'll explain what the impact of that is. So farmers losing their topsoil because there's not soil carbon, because the practices that they have are not the right ones. This is the connection I want to make. And for decision makers, and here I'm thinking about the African Development Bank, not just in the terms of water, but in its agriculture and forest policy, the kinds of investments you make, you need to understand where the hotspots are, where the drivers of change are coming from, so that you can direct your investments into those areas and change the practices on the ground that are threatening the lifelines, these lifelines of Africa. Yeah. We need the hard evidence. So I'm going to have to jump to another water basin on another continent to show you the impacts of erosion, because we've been studying it there a lot closer. In any system, the origins of threats tends to come from bad practices. Now this is a hillside in Bhutan, where you can see, as a result of bad practice, bare land and huge erosivity. This is a picture from 2006, before ICRAF started working in this area. And 5 or 6 years later, with terracing, better agricultural practices and agroforestry, this hillside started looking a lot better, and the participatory management of this and the monitoring of the erosion from these landscapes suggested that by a factor of 10, we were losing less soil off these landscapes. Because the soil from those landscapes was going down into the big Brahmaputra river basin and covering the rich alluvial soils with sand. This meant that farmers in that huge basin were getting lower and lower productivity out of the land, the crops were failing. And until we get such practices to scale, until we have the hard evidence that decision makers, policy makers, and investors need, we're not going to solve the problems that Asia is facing and Africa is bound to face with the management as population densities increase, for instance, in the highlands of East Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravi. One of the last points you made was the importance of learning from what is happening in other continents as a way of extrapolating, forecasting what is likely to happen at home here in Africa. I think we must learn not only from within Africa, but from outside Africa in order to know what to expect here. Thank you very much.